Hey folks, it's Fernando doing another video for the More Survivalists. Here I have a question, an email from one of you guys asking about relocating to Chile. I have covered Chile before in my previous videos, but as always, any comments, questions that you have, I'll do my best to answer them. So here we go. Here it says, Dear Fairfall, I have read your book that gave me a lot of new ideas. Well, thank you for that. Currently, I'm living in Germany in a big city. I want to have a second option in a shit-hit defense situation and was thinking of obtaining a permanent residency in Chile. Chile is close to Argentina, so I'm asking me, why did you choose Ireland and not Chile? Are there some pitfalls that I'm not aware of? What is a disadvantage of a bug-out location in the rural area of Chile? The ground is still affordable? Thank you and kind regards. Okay, this is from Peter. Yeah, first of all, I think that the book you're making reference to is my first book, which is the More Survival Manual. In my second book, Bugging Out and Relocating, I actually do address this. In fact, because if this is the book that you do have, check page 105. In page 105, I explain relocating to Latin America. All right. If this is the one that you have, page 105, here I explain the reasons why I wouldn't consider Latin America, why I didn't end up moving to some other country in Latin America, which would of course have been much easier for me. I mean, I was already in Argentina. Moving to Uruguay, moving to Chile would have been so much easier than moving all across to Europe. Now, and this is something that I explain in the book, I think to quite an extent. I'm someone that lived my entire life in one of these places, right? In Argentina. I lived, over 30 years in Argentina. I know the rest of Latin America pretty well. I know how similar and different it is. The thing that you guys don't quite get is that the third world is very, very different from what you're used to. You're in Germany. Unless you've lived several years, and even for you guys that have been in the military travel, you don't know what it's like to live in these places. You just have no freaking idea what it is like. I don't care that you went to Iraq, Afghanistan. If you haven't lived there for several years, if you haven't had your kids there with you for several years, you don't know what life is like in these places. And I'm saying this, and I'm being pretty emphatic about it because there's this romantic idea that everyone in Latin America is just, sipping piña coladas under the sun and living. That's really not what it's like. It's very dangerous. It's very stressful. You just don't know what's going to be happening the following day. Even Chile, which is one of the better off countries in the region, it's quite unstable, especially compared to a place like Germany. When you're talking about extreme ends of the spectrum, Germany being as one of the most reliable, solid countries in the planet versus some of the most unstable ones in the country, in the planet. It's complete opposites, and you just don't know what it's like unless you spend quite some time. Even if you move there. And this happens many times. Let's say you like Argentina. You love Argentina because you love beef, you love football, you love tango, and you like sipping wine. And you're moving to Argentina, and you spend a few months there doing all these things you enjoy and love and such, and you're thinking, man, this is absolutely fantastic. Now, give it a couple more years, or give it one more year. 90% of the time you're going to be getting sick of living there in just a few more months, not even years. Wherever it is that you're going, there's always going to be a honeymoon period, as I like calling it. The first year is the one in which you are more like a tourist than an actual resident of the place, living and is seeing more of the cons and the things that you don't like about living in such a place. In the case of going from a developed nation to a developing country, to a third world country, to a place anywhere in Latin America, the shock is going to be huge. I know there's very few cases, I know very few cases of people that are still very happy there. Actually, most of the people that I know that, Americans that lived in Argentina and such, they ended up moving back to the United States. They didn't stay. it's just too unstable. It's just too much of a mess. Even if, let's suppose you're not that worried about crime and insecurity, you just have a different philosophical approach to it, you're not worried about it. But when you see how much of a mess absolutely everything is, I mean, things that in Germany, in the United States, would just take you, like 5 minutes of a phone call, having your cable installed. Yeah, when are you coming? Yeah, this day, and they actually show up and they actually do everything. You want to buy a car, you just go there, pay for it, sign it up, or register anywhere. Everything is much faster, much more simple. In places like Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, anywhere in South America, everything is a mess. Everything takes days, and not just days of waiting for stuff. It actually takes, maybe it will take, having your phone line installed or opening a bank account, or it may take days of waiting in line. You may be waiting in line an entire day so as to get your phone installed, or your cable, or your internet. And once you reach the end of the line, you find some sweaty guy or lady tired and looking at you and telling you, yeah, you actually need this paper that you get over there in this other address. And you show up to the other address, and it's another day-long line, another day-long queue waiting for a paper, and then they tell you, yeah, well, it's really not here that you get it. And then you go back to the previous lady, and she tells you, yeah, but you're still missing this one. And you get angry and you tell her, yeah, but you didn't tell me to get this. You told me to get this and this other one. You never mentioned this other one. Yeah, but yeah, I think I told you. And you will feel like burning the place down, but that's life in South America. Every single thing is like that. You want to sell a car, you have to have a notarized by an attorney and whatnot, and you go to an attorney, and it's not an attorney from that place. It has to be from a different district, because everyone is, in many ways, guys, you folks from first world countries, you guys from developed nations and such, Europe, United States, you're awfully naive in many ways. I know that you may be thinking that that's not the case, but you are. You don't realize how insane it ends up being when in these places nothing works. I mean, nothing works as it's supposed to. It will drive you completely nuts unless you are a tree-hugging hippie that has that has half the brain fried with pot, and you have a different register of life entirely. You're gonna be going nuts. You're not gonna be. I don't see how anyone sane from Germany can adapt to living in a place like that. Maybe there is someone, because everyone is different and such, but it's not a different country. It's a different universe, and I don't think that it's that much of a great idea. So first of all, regarding your question, why not Chile for myself or for you? Because it's still a third world country. Sometimes people think, no, Chile is not Chile is first. Well, no, it's not first world. It's third world. Sometimes people from there get offended and such. I mean, I have guys from Argentina getting pissed at me because I say Argentina is a third world country. I'm completely proud of the country I come from, but I do recognize what it is. Unfortunately, so it is a third world country. There's really nothing we can do about it. Well, maybe there is, but the point still remains. It is what it is. Chile, same thing. Yeah, it's a little bit better off than Argentina economically, at least. Yeah. Does it share many of the huge problems? Absolutely. It's still a third world country in Latin America. Maybe one of the better ones, absolutely. But you also have Uruguay that's not doing nearly as bad. If you ask me, I would go for Uruguay instead. Chile, keep in mind, is also quite expensive. I'm absolutely certain that some of the cheaper places in Germany will be cheaper than living in Chile. In Germany, a working class neighborhood in Chile, or a place in the country, or some smaller town in Germany will absolutely be cheaper than similar standards of living in Chile. And here again, people being very, very naive. You think you're going to be going there and paying just pennies for service and such. It's nowhere near as cheap as advertised. It's advertised as being very cheap because there has to be some it's something that appeals to people, but in reality, when you end up going there, and the thing is this, many of the things that you have already taken for granted in Germany, you will have to pay for in Chile. Okay, in this working class community in Germany, you're going to be safe. You're going to be walking down the streets. In general, you may have more dangerous places and whatnot, but in general, Germany, you can walk around. You're not going to be getting kidnapped, shot, stabbed. In Chile, it's nowhere near as safe. In Chile, like in Argentina, you have to pay for private security, and that's one of the things that you're not keeping in mind, and you already have, and you have it taken for granted in Germany. Latin America, you will have to pay for that. Good education for your kids, if you have them, you will have to pay for that. Medical care, quality medical care, in Chile, it's going to be freaking expensive. It's going to be much more expensive than in Germany. And in spite of that, it's not going to be as good as the free one that you have in Germany. All right, you may have some better aspects of it, especially if you're going to be paying for some of the more fancier plans and such. But at the end of the day, anything that's more complex, you're much better off in Germany. So you see all these things start adding up, and you realize that makes no sense. So that's why I ended up in Ireland instead of Chile, because Europe in general, you have first world countries. Latin America, you don't, and you have all these problems that I know that many times it's being pushed as a great place to be. I think it was Galt's Gulch. Galt's Gulch, was it? Yeah, of the libertarian thing. Ended up being a complete nightmare. They didn't have the rights of the water rights. I think that they said they had. They didn't have the subdivisions and such. And as always, you guys fall for some of the crap that it's unbelievable. But you have people, the realtors or the investors that buy these places. They go to you and they tell, yeah, we bribed the guy, we bribed the mayor in Chile, or we bribed the mayor or the governor in Argentina. Yeah, we have him already. He's on, we bribed him, so he's going to be doing. How naive can you be? I mean, this is a guy that you just bribed. How can you trust this guy in any way at all? You bribing the guy doesn't mean that he's going to be trustworthy for years to come. He's not going to be even trustworthy for days later. I mean, the minute you pay him is the minute that he turns around and he says, I don't know who you are. I mean, anything that you get signed, approved by someone in Latin America through bribery will just fall apart the minute he's no longer there for you, which is as soon as he needs money again. This happens to you guys all the time, and I'm talking here to folks, especially you guys in the United States. Americans fall for this all the time. I don't know why, but you do. I keep reading the stories, keep getting the emails, and I'm talking about very smart people that ended up, caught in things where they start bribing the local politicians in these rat holes. It's so obvious what's going to be happening. It never ends up well. How could it possibly end up well? Anything that started with you bribing a local politician or a local authority of any kind? It's stupid to think that you have any sort of stability because you bribed someone at some point. No way, absolutely not. So. And this happens all the time in Latin America, and this is one of the problems with Latin America. Like, the corruption is not an advantage, as I have read some Americans investors. The guy in Argentina, I don't even remember his name anymore, but the guy in Argentina who was making a development in Salta, he was bragging about bribing people. You're insane. You're not going to be getting anything with that. At least not anything stable or long-lasting. You're not. The minute the guy is no longer there, I mean, and they change hands all the time. You're going to be having to bribe someone else, and then someone else, and then the local cops, and then the new guy that comes. It will never end. They will pick you for every single cent you have. So, yeah, and probably, you know what? At the end of the day, the guy that gets screwed the most is the final buyer that bought from the developer. The developer picks up stakes and leaves and takes all the money, and you're stuck living in these places with no rights whatsoever because you never had them. Anything that you got through shady channels, and that's the way it is. So my advice would be the following: you're in Germany, you want to have a place, an alternative location if something happens, start looking nearby. I mean, you're in Germany already, maybe a smaller town within Germany. You know, Germany has been around for quite some time. I don't expect it to fall apart anytime soon. I understand that having maybe not a plan B for me, for someone in Europe, would be probably within Europe itself. You know, if you want something a little bit further away, you have actually Eastern Europe quite nearby, and you have quite a bit of a margin there, even though you have Russia and such. But you have, you know, several places, Slovakia, Czech Republic. You have these places, or going up north to the Nordic countries. You have different places where if you want a secluded, isolated retreat, which I think is kind of what you're going for based on you thinking of rural Chile, I would much go for rural Sweden than rural Chile any day of the year. Absolutely, no question whatsoever. So, looking first within Germany. If you're not happy with Germany, looking a little bit more north, some of those wooded areas, Sweden, Norway, you have some great places there for someone that wants to just disappear. And these are places where people have been doing this kind of stuff for a lot of time, and they are very good at it, and it's a stable country. All right, that's huge. You don't appreciate how important that is. In all of these countries, anything that you signed, any agreement that you have, any right that you have, you actually have it. You don't have a make-believe right that's going to be disappearing within a matter of hours, like what was happening in these other places. Chile doesn't have particularly good gun laws. Chile is constantly suffering earthquakes, which is one of the main reasons why I didn't like it. I mean, it's constantly moving. The big earthquake that they had a few years ago, people didn't react that well. They were actually quite violent. It turned very violent very fast, much faster than most people would have thought. Within the same day, people were attacking each other over water. So it's not as if it's the safest place to be or the safest type of society over there in Chile. If I would have to go for South America, as I've written in the book before and explained, Uruguay would be maybe one of my first choices in South America. If I had to go back to South America, of course, Argentina, my country, if I just had to, I had no other choice. But we're still talking third world countries, huge difference from developed nations, no question whatsoever. Even within Europe, if you don't like up north, you have, you know what, Spain, southern coast of Spain, La Costa del Sol, you have Malaga, Marbella, full of German expats. You already have a huge German community in a country that is within the European zone. It has great medical care, very affordable cost of living, absolutely fantastic climate, all things that are huge, that are very important. No question whatsoever. Chile, I wouldn't even bother with it. In all honesty, my plan B would be somewhere much closer nearby. And if you absolutely, before you get your plan C place, before buying a place or getting a residency in Chile or buying land in Chile, buy somewhere nearby, much closer to you, and it's going to be pretty much on the same price range, and the cost of living is going to be as good or even better, no question whatsoever. But if this is the book that you have, and these are the kind of questions that you have, you probably want to check Bugging Out and Relocating, link below, where I go into detail on all these stuff. Again, realistic stuff. I don't waste my time with the zombies and fighting the United Nations over that sort of nonsense. For realistic preparedness, Chile really doesn't make a lot of sense, especially not for someone that's already in Germany. That's the way I see it. There's always exceptions, people that have different opinions and such, but based on my research and what I know and such, that's my advice for you. Folks, remember to subscribe, thumbs up, share, take care, have a great day, and see you on our next video.